Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's Cabinet meeting of the 2nd of July. So I'd like to welcome members of the Cabinet, officers and members of the viewing public on YouTube to this virtual meeting of the Cabinet. I am Dina Romero and I am leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council. So I will now read out the names of the other participants for this meeting and just get them to indicate that they can actually hear and also be heard. So I'd like to introduce Councillor Richard Samuel. Could you just unmute yourself and say that you're here?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Crosley.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. Can you mute yourself again, please? Councillor Sarah Warren.
Present, good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Ball.
I'm here this afternoon. Pleasant to be here and hear your voice again.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Dave Wood.
Present.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Joanna Wright.
Hello.
Councillor Rob Appleyard.
Yeah, present. Thank you, your leader.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Kevin Guy.
Present, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. And Councillor Neil Butters.
Present. Good afternoon, all.
Thank you, Neil. Also present are the Chief Executive, Will Godfrey.
Good afternoon.
And Michael Hewitt is our Legal Services Manager.
Yes, Chair.
And also, by no means least, but certainly last on my list, is Jack Lakovic, who is the Senior Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you.
Okay, this meeting is being held under the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales Regulations 2020. The Council has agreed a protocol to cover virtual meetings, and this meeting will operate in line with that protocol. The meeting has a similar status and validity as a meeting held in the Guildhall. Can I remind members, officers and speakers to keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time and not to speak over others. Please mute your microphones when not speaking, then unmute when I invite you to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by using the raise my hand facility in Zoom, and then I will call you each to speak in turn. If a member of the Cabinet has to leave the meeting, then please draw my attention to this by using the chat facility. If you subsequently return to the meeting, then please also draw my attention to this in the same way. Members should also inform me if they lose connection and miss any part of the meeting, as this may result in them not being able to vote, if a vote is required, on any item that they did not hear in full. Councillor Richard Samuel will take over the chairing of the meeting if I have to leave the meeting or lose my connection. If Cabinet is required to take a vote, I will just ask for Cabinet to raise their hands, and then we'll be able to count those as appropriate. And then the other thing is that we may well just note a paper, and in that case I will just ask those who are not in favour of noting to indicate. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of my bit here, which is just to alert people that occasionally Cabinet members' video feed may go blank, and this may show to you as a black screen. Some Cabinet members use their iPads to participate at this meeting and also to look at their agenda papers, and this temporarily switches off their video feed. Those Cabinet members will still be at the meeting, as they will be able to hear and be heard at the meeting, which are virtual meeting requirements under the Coronavirus Regulations 2020. Okay, thank you. So I'm just checking if there's anything else that I needed to announce at that part, and luckily Jack is not going to announce the emergency procedures. Okay, I don't have any apologies for absence, and that means all cabinet members are here. The third item on my agenda is a declaration of interest, and I'm now going to ask Michael Hewitt if he could just outline exactly what other interests might need to be declared at this moment.
Okay, so for the purpose of today's meeting, the monitor officer has provided a dispensation for members whose relatives are in receipt of financial remuneration from the government or who are in receipt of council services.
So that applies to themselves as well as their family members.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we now move. Sorry, Mike, can I just confirm that you have received a list of all those that fall into that category?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. So now I move on to item 4, which is urgent business agreed by the chair. So I have agreed to bring the COVID-19 local outbreak management plan into this meeting under this heading. This decision is to be made under Part 4B, Rule 16 of the Council's Constitution, as it is an urgent decision. This matter is urgent because of the expectation that the Council would need to have an agreed plan in place for the beginning of July 2020 in light of the coronavirus pandemic. So this report has received an endorsement from the Health and Wellbeing Board on the 23rd of June. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Appleyard to introduce and to move this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think as you mentioned just now, the COVID situation has always been very fast moving, and clarity on what is required of us hasn't always been as we would have liked it. And literally a short while ago, we were tasked by the government to actually have a local outbreak management plan, commonly known as the LOMP. The Director of Public Health, Dr. Bruce Lawrence, and his team have been working very hard over the last few weeks to bring this quite comprehensive document together, which should give an indication of actions needed if we obviously experience any other further outbreaks or anything else in the future. This document isn't just about the council, it's about working with our partners, people like the CCG, our hospitals, Virgin Care, and a range of other people to ensure that we cover all the bases when this is actually, or unfortunately, if we need to use this. And one would always hope that we don't need to use it, but you know, it's good insurance. It has gone to the Health and Wellbeing Board, where we had quite intense discussions about it and questions about it. It's a lengthy document. As I said, it covers a lot of elements in there. And other than just thanking Dr. Lawrence and his team and the contributors for this document in such a short period of time, I do move this is for adoption by the Cabinet, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to second this plan. And like Councillor Appleyard, I'd also like to say a particular thanks to Dr. Bruce Lawrence and also to officers who have managed to put this plan together in record time so that we could meet the demand of government to have this plan published by the beginning of July. I'd also like to say thank you to all those that have been part of the pandemic stakeholders group during the first 3 months of this pandemic. And it is this group that will form the basis for the local outbreak engagement board. And I thank them for their continued commitment to working together. And finally, I would like to thank again all those that have worked above and beyond to help and support others and provide services during this crisis. These key people are our staff and a wide range of volunteers, parish councillors, and many others, including those who just think they've just helped their neighbours. Everything you've done is appreciated, and I thank you. So I'd like to now ask others if they want to speak to this paper. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up. So I will ask Rob if you have anything further you wish to add at this moment, and then we will move to the vote. Sorry, Rob, you're still muted.
Oh, just there. I think I'm unmuted now, am I?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, how lovely. I love technology. Yeah. No, really, possibly only to reaffirm what you said about our community, because I mean, without a doubt, the Compassionate Hub and all the local groups that have come together to support possibly, you know, our shielded cohort within the community have done an absolutely amazing job. And we do get comments from other authorities about what a sterling job that our residents have done in coming together. So I'm immensely proud to be involved in that piece of work. And other than that, I just really would like the Cabinet to adopt this plan, please.
Thank you. Okay, so we now move to the vote. As I said before, for this, if you could all raise your hands if you are in favour. So please indicate if you're in favour of adopting this plan.
That is unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, so the plan is now adopted and will be implemented straight away. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda are the questions from the public and also from councillors. So we have received, I'll start with the questions from councillors, I think. So I'll just run through these questions. So the first question we had from June Player was to Councillor Wright. I do not believe she is here to ask a supplementary. The second question is to Richard Samuel from Karen Warrington, and I do not believe she is here to ask a supplementary either. Question 4 from Councillor Myers to Councillor Samuel. Is he here to ask a supplementary? Thank you. Question 5, again from Councillor Myers to Richard Samuel. I'm not seeing an indication of a supplementary there. Question 6 from Councillor Paul May to Councillor Samuel. No supplementary. Councillor Paul May again to Richard Samuel. No supplementary. Question 8 from Paul May to Councillor Samuel. No supplementary. Question 9 from Councillor May to Richard Samuel. No supplementary. Question 10 from Councillor Johnson to Tim Ball. Is there a supplementary? Thank you. And question 11 from Councillor Johnson to Councillor Paul Crosley. Is there a supplementary for this question?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I think that Councillor Johnson has 2 supplementary questions. I don't know if he's live now or the meeting. Yes, he is.
Okay, so Councillor Johnson, can I invite you to unmute and to open up your video link? And there you are. Would you like to ask your supplementary questions, please?
Yes, I'd like to thank Cabinet Member for his robust response to my original question. My first supplementary question is, your response talks a lot about both historical and current factors that have shaped the way we see our council chamber today. In the novel Persuasion, Jane Austen's character Anne Elliot says, "Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher a degree, the pen has been in their hands." Do you believe your answer to be the perfect example of the kind of persistent structural inequality that has not only tarnished this council since before Jane Austen's time, but still tarnishes it today?
No. I think the problem that you've got, Councillor Grant, is that you are looking only at our arts in the council chamber. If you look in the broader context, in advance, before the floods, the leaks started coming in over the entry by the leader's office, we had the wedding day party, which was 2 young ladies. We have outside the chamber, we have Harry Patch, which is a modern image and presentation. So there is a continual changeover of art around all the places that we display them. And as we redecorate and refurbish, then we do review at that point what goes on in the images we want. And changes have been made before you brought this interesting point to us about diversity, and they are going on. So I think across the whole of our portfolio range, the answer is definitely no.
Okay, I've got a second supplementary, if that's okay, Dina.
That is, yes, I was going to invite you to ask it.
Thank you. In your answer, you mentioned that the period's decoration in the council chamber earned us £9,406 in 2019 due to it being used as a film location. You also mentioned that the addition of any modern images, which are more in keeping with our quality standards, would prejudice the aesthetics of the room. Does the Cabinet not agree that the only prejudice being displayed here is that of a council which appears to care more about a small amount of revenue than it does the equality of its citizens?
I think, again, Councillor, you're missing very many points here. The fact that we only get direct income of 9,000 is actually marginal compared to the benefit that we get as an authority area when our facilities are shown on primetime TV in very popular locations, in very popular series, not just in the UK, but around the world. So the impact of the filming in Bath goes way beyond the direct revenue that the council earns. And this helps support our many cafes and venues around Bath and North East Somerset. So I think what we do, as I referred to in the first supplementary, we have to have a look at a balance of pictures and images. And it is certainly true that we are currently in the process of looking at the images that are in the Guildhall chamber. But as part of that process, we would be looking for things that are in keeping with the decor of the chamber. So I don't think we'd be having, for instance, a piece of modern art in there, but we might have different images and different portraits.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry,
and
sorry,
thank you as well, Councillor Johnson. Sorry.
I didn't actually answer. I missed the last sentence out. So actually what the citizens want from us is good management, and they want us to see our assets gaining revenue for them so that they get good value from the council tax that we raise. And that is the best way that we can ensure the equality of all our systems by providing good services and good facilities. Thank you.
Is that your last sentence?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry for my apologies for speaking over you. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Crossley, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your two questions. I'm actually going to go back to question 12. Unfortunately, I wasn't notified that Councillor Elinor Jackson did want to ask a supplementary question, so I'm now going to invite her to ask her supplementary question, which will be to Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I didn't manage to get this question in earlier, but the definitive answer to my question only emerged this morning, and I would very much like to thank the Cabinet member for the view which has now been arrived at, not to restrict the parking in the centre of Radstock, but to access shops anywhere in Baines actually, but particularly in Radstock and Westfield, where I know the actual figures, there's quite a few pedestrian safety issues. So I'd like to ask him whether he would consider reviewing the crossings on the Frome Road and general measures to make things safer for people to walk instead of come by car. And if he could do something to get the bridge built across from Nelson Ward Drive to St Nicholas's Primary School so that children have a much safer way to walk to school. And I don't expect an immediate answer if it's not possible.
I assume you knew, Councillor Jackson, that you were asking that of Councillor Joanna Wright?
I'm so sorry. No, I didn't.
That's all right. Thank you for your questions. Yes, we really realise that the issues in North East Somerset are as important as those issues in Bath, and how people move around during COVID-19 is important to all the members of the community. Staying well and staying safe at this point in history is going to make a difference to all of us in this community. We would very much look into the detail of your questions, and I wouldn't be able to give you a detailed answer right now, but if you could forward those information to us, I will certainly get officers to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, and thank you, Councillor Jackson, for your question. So the next part of the questions is questions from the public. There was one question which has been answered, and there are no supplementaries to that section. We now move to item 6, which is statements, and I understand there are 2 speakers who wish to speak at this point, and I will ask David Redgewell if he would like to perhaps unmute and put his video on so he can speak to us.
Yeah, the video's turned off. I don't know why, but on my end. Just wanted to, I think that might be working. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leader of Council. Yes, it's about the recovery plan really, and the West of England Combined Authority. I have to ask myself a number of times, I think, whether the West of England Combined Authority works for Bath sometimes and works for Bristol. The issue there is because the Mayor has been given instructions by the Department of Transport to up the bus services now back to 80 to 100%. And that is an instruction from Grant Shapps and was issued for the weekend, this weekend, in fact, when the pubs, restaurants and hotels reopen across Bath and North East Somerset and the rest of Wacker and North Somerset. I'm proud to say, despite the great work from Neil, and I got to pay tribute to Neil and Joanna for getting the rural buses back, which is great to see, we still don't have evening services back in the rural areas, and we don't have weekend services back between Radstock, Midsummer Norton and Bristol, and also we don't have any buses whatsoever between Bath and Bristol via Kelston and Weston, Longmore Green, St George and Lawrence Hill. They capped completely. We did get the bus service back between Bath and Kingswood via Keynsham and Cadbury Heath, but that's only a Monday to Friday service. And when you consider we had nearly a 90% evening and Sunday, so evening and weekend service running before COVID-19, I would just like to ask why the Mayor has still not restored the services as per the government directive. This is also, of course, also the same situation in Bristol and in South Gloucestershire. So it's not picking on one particular part of the West of England Combined Authority, but he's also responsible, of course, for the business recovery plan for the West of England, including Bath and North East Somerset, and he has to produce that to government. He also, of course, has to help you with your recovery plan and your financial difficulties, along with Bristol and South Gloucestershire. I'd like to see some progress here. I note I listened to the webinar very interestingly, Leader of Council the other day about talking to the MPs about getting money for Bath and North East Somerset. I would just like to ask what our Metro Mayor is doing to get money for Bath and North East Somerset, bearing in mind he has access to ministers and government as a combined authority.
60 seconds.
Okay, just to say, I'd be grateful if we can make progress on this. I grateful for all the work on social distancing in the town centres, but remind that, of course, we have disabled people and bus users that have to use bus stops and access to the town centres. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, and thank you for keeping very nearly to time. It is appreciated. So I'm just going to ask first Councillor Butters and Councillor Wright if they have any questions or comments they just want to make at this point on that statement. Neil.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Dave. We're all in awe of the amount of effort that you put in on this particular subject. So I think thanks on behalf of very many people who take such an interest. It is very difficult for bus operators at the moment dealing with social distancing, and that has a number of repercussions because some buses are getting quote, full, even though they may only have, say, 7 passengers out of a usual 20 or 20 out of a usual 70. And yet they have to move people as best they can. And so they have to assign additional buses to particular routes. I know in some cases, I'm not saying it's in the cases you're talking about, but some services are greatly improved on what they were simply because of necessity, but obviously it's leaving holes in the system elsewhere. Drivers are, some of them have been furloughed, some have problems in getting back to work because they're shielding and helping others, etc. So it is a major problem. We are meeting with WECA. We have WECA Transport Board coming up fairly shortly, and Joe and I will pursue the points you make as far as they affect Bath and North East Somerset. So thank you once again for all your efforts.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. I don't know if Councillor Wright has anything to add. No? Okay, that's lovely. Okay, so thank you, David, for your statement. We will take that on board, as you heard. I'd now like to invite Councillor Elinor Jackson, who I understand also has a statement that she wishes to make.
Well, I just wondered, Chair, if I could say before I start how very glad I am to see David Redgewell back again. I really missed him from council meetings when I was chair of the council, so it's great to have you back, David. Yes, so what I wanted to say this afternoon is others may summarise the government's failings over the coronavirus crisis and its impact on our residents better than I. Lament the shortfall in funding for remedial measures more eloquently, and praise all the myriads of volunteers and staff who went above and beyond, sometimes at terrible cost to themselves, more loudly. But I'm here this afternoon to plead for a bit of common sense, gumption in plain English, as we say in Yorkshire. Sadly, it's not just the virus that can prove fatal, but the measures put in place to combat it, or equally tragically, removed prematurely. As a council, as parish councillors, and as individuals, we need as many hard-based, science-evaluated facts as possible. And I am sure that our officers are doing their best to extrapolate the information we need from all the confusing and contradictory government statements in this rapidly evolving situation. And I, in fact, would like to compliment our officers on the report that has just been presented to Cabinet. I came here to represent the Radstock Westfield traders, businesses and shoppers, because I have been campaigning since 2006 to get the area recognised as a retail destination in its own right, a social hub and a good place to do business. It's been very tough because certain officers failed to hear what senior planning officers have said about the 100-space lack of parking in the town centre, the cyclists about the lack of connectivity in National Highway 24 cycle track, and the various community groups about the shortage of community space for meetings and events. However, in this new, challenging, far from normal world, I'm sure you are listening. I am so glad that common sense about the proposal to remove parking in the street and Fortescue Road, Radstock, has prevailed. You just need to get the enormous hedge stretching across the pavement from the Children's Centre in Church Street cut, and the scaffolding that's sticking out into the road by the Victoria Hall removed. Ideology-driven politics on working and cycling have to be flexible if the villages in North East Somerset are not to be even more isolated. So I'll just finish with the Otley solution to the problem. In Otley, in West Yorkshire, they get all the pedestrians to walk up one side of the street in one direction, and when they're coming back in the other direction, on the other side of the street. And this only takes a little bit of paint on the pavements to indicate where people should walk. So please consider this walking one side of the road only. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Does anybody have any comments or any questions to put to Councillor Jackson? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Councillor Jackson, for your statement. I'm not sure that we should all go off to Otley to have a look for ourselves at how they do it there, but I will take your word for it that that's how it works there. And thank you for your statement.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other speakers. No. So we move now to item 7, which is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 29th of May. Do I have any comments or not on the minutes? If not, I will move that they are a correct record of that meeting, and I would ask for someone to second that.
Happy to second.
Thank you. I think I've got 3 seconders, so that's fantastic. Okay, so can I just ask everyone to indicate their approval that these are okay to sign?
That's unanimous.
Thank you, Jack. And obviously, in due course, I will actually sign these as a record of the meeting. Okay, item 8 is single member items, now requisitioned to Cabinet, and there are none. And then item 9 is matters referred by PDS. So I'd like to invite Councillor Paul Myers as Chair of Resources, the Resources PDS panel to address the Cabinet. Councillor Myers, can you unmute yourself and turn your video on, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can definitely hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to present a summary report of our meeting on Tuesday this week, the 30th of June, from the Special Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel. The meeting summary and recommendations on COVID-19 2021 Financial Recovery Plan is what I'm going to focus on, which was the main subject of the meeting. The panel acknowledged the report that had been submitted to them and thanked the officers for their time taken to prepare and present it. Detailed questioning was undertaken by the panel, and they raised points on a number of matters during the discussion of the report. And I put these under headings. In terms of income to council, there were questions concerning what percentage of activity may return and when, council tax collection fund, business rates income, and reintroduction of parking charges. On the financial recovery plans, there were questions about directorate recovery measures, use of unmarked council reserves in comparisons with other councils, MHCLG additional support, and it was noted that the auditors were aware of the plan. There were questions concerning commercial estate, the council's capital programme, implications for the council's budget 2021-22, and questions around and concerning a potential for a second wave or spike preparation should one occur in coronavirus. The meeting concluded with the panel agreeing the following recommendations, and there were 4 of those, and I'll just run through those. The panel commended the overall shape of the recovery plan, given the balance shown between the use of reserves, assumptions over government funding, and reduction in spending. They asked the Cabinet to consider the implications on the Council's commercial estate business tenants with regard to the timing of seeking rent arrears to be paid by the end of the year. They also asked Cabinet to review parking charges whilst at the same time being mindful of climate emergency issues. And finally, they asked Cabinet to directly reference the points raised by the Cabinet Member for Resources, Councillor Richard Samuel, during the debate in relation to the Council's future plans assumptions. In particular, income levels to the Council that it has grown on to rely on will not return by next year. Parking income may return sooner as people are less likely to be less reliant on public transport. Heritage income will not return to its previous levels for some time due to the likelihood of some form of social distancing being in place over the next 12 months. and the commercial estate may take around 5 years to return to its previous levels of income. And that is a summary of the discussion and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I'm not actually going to have too many additional points to make at this moment, but we will definitely take on board, you know, your comments, and as many of us were there whilst your scrutiny panel were discussing this paper, you know, we will all be mindful of the detail behind the points that you've raised, and we'll take that into account now and obviously in future, you know, when we look to perhaps amend and adjust proposals in due course. So thank you very much for your comments, and as I said, we will take those into account when we discuss the financial recovery plan at item 11. But before we get to item 11, we'll need to go to item 10, which is just to note the single member decisions that have been taken. Okay, so there's no debate on this item, so we just need to note the report. And unless I see otherwise, I'm going to take it that you all are in agreement that we should note this report. I'm not seeing that anybody disagrees with that, so I would like to record that we have noted the report. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is item 11, and this is obviously the plan that Councillor Paul Myers was referring to when he gave us his update from the Policy Development and Scrutiny panel that he chairs. I don't believe there's anybody who wishes to make a statement before this item, so I'm going to move straight into asking Councillor Samuel to introduce the report and to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. Well, the COVID crisis has wreaked havoc, as we know, across our economy and throughout our populations in the UK. And the impacts on this council are no exception. So just as businesses and households have to repair the damages to their finances, so we have to do the same to ensure that we remain financially viable today and in the years ahead. Now, there are some who say that this should and could have been anticipated. However, those people are flying in the face of the facts. Globally, no country, no government, no local administration fully anticipated the scale of the problem, and none was able to set aside funds to cover the current scale of the crisis. Those who make such arguments are seeking to make cheap political capital out of the misery of a truly global crisis. Now, would it have been any different had the UK acted more quickly, as countries such as New Zealand did? Well, probably, but that's a debate for a different day. Now, as members will know, pressure has been building on the government to honour the commitments they gave at the start of the pandemic. And we have played our part in lobbying our special case for additional assistance. We are delighted that the detailed work we have carried out with government officials finally appears to have paid off with the announcement of new assistance this morning by Robert Jenrick. It is actually too early to interpret exactly what the additional funding announcement means for the council, and the detail is yet to be published. However, on the face of it, it seems that we are now more in the green scenario we originally planned, where budget reductions will still be required, but will be of less severity. We are not out of the wood yet, and it remains unlikely that all the losses that we have identified will be covered, and there will still be a need to reduce expenditure this year. However, it was never the case that we should do nothing and rely on hope that at year end our finances would magically return to balance, because income has returned to pre-COVID levels, and our government has provided lots of unexpected funds. Well, the choice we had was to take control of that situation and take decisive action to secure our finances, thus securing a quicker return to stability. It was never an option to do nothing.
I want to turn to the root of the difficulties faced by the council, because this is relevant in the light of today's announcement. As members will know, the council achieves one of the highest levels of externally generated income of all unitary councils in proportion to its budget. This means that our budget was one of the most exposed to reductions in that income, and why we have had a particularly difficult position to deal with. And those income reductions can be exactly traced to the government's decision to lock down the population, thus choking off those income streams. And as I said earlier, we have argued strongly for assistance with ministers and officials. And last week, we held a meeting with the local government minister, Simon Clarke, to press our case for special support. Now, today's announcement not only provides unrestricted emergency funds, although those are very limited and have already produced a negative reaction from the local government sector, but they also announce a grant support package that recognises authorities' income losses in a bespoke way, as we have argued for right from the beginning. Now, in a nutshell, the government has announced that losses over and above the first 5% of planned income from sales fees and charges will be compensated at a rate of 75p in every pound. This appears to cover heritage and parking income losses, but is silent as to whether commercial estate income will be compensated. The detail as to how this scheme will be administered has not yet been announced, and when we are aware of that, we will return to it later on. Now, I want to just deal with some of the points that Councillor Myers raised in his presentation to Cabinet. At the PDS panel earlier this week, I speculated as to what might happen to those three main income streams, and I'm just going to repeat these for the record. We do not believe that heritage income will fully recover in 2021. So although the Roman Baths will open next week, because of social distancing requirements, we still expect capacity to be reduced to 30% of normal. And the same applies to the assembly rooms and the pump rooms. Longer term prospects depend to some extent on the world appetite for international tourism, and in particular flying returning. Some mitigation is possible through increased UK tourism, but we expect income to be depressed below 1920 levels. On parking income, we do expect that to return closer to pre-COVID levels, particularly if greater car use occurs due to social distancing requirements on public transport continuing. And then want to turn to commercial income. Commercial income is not expected to return to pre-COVID levels during 2021, and longer term prospects are highly unpredictable due to uncertainty about the financial health of the retail and hospitality sector, many of whom are our clients, and some businesses have argued publicly for rent-free periods to be granted. Now, I've asked what the estimated additional loss to the council would be were we to do that. And what I've been advised is that the increased losses would be around £1 million a month if we were to grant rent-free periods, say, to all of our tenants. And I think in the environment the report sets out, it is not prudent to go down that road with our tenants, but we are prepared to negotiate and discuss deferments and different payment arrangements with all of our tenants, and indeed have been doing so. I want to just return now to the report itself as I move to wind up. Now, first, can I say what the report is not? It is not a new medium-term financial strategy that tries to plot the course of the next 3 years. Rather, it is a recovery plan that deals with the urgent situation we face. A revised medium-term financial strategy will be prepared that addresses and examines the future cost pressures the council will face, and will, as part of its content, consider the fiscal environment post-COVID. I believe that's the correct way to approach our financial management, not in reverse order, as suggested by opposition members. When there is a fire, you put it out quickly, and then you rebuild your house You do not rebuild your house and then allow the fire to take hold. So we are taking urgent action as is necessary to secure this year's finances, and we will deal with the longer term position in due course. I would like to place on record thanks to everyone who has shaped this plan, helped shape this plan in such a short time. This has been a terrific piece of council-wide teamwork in quite difficult circumstances. And as has been mentioned, our auditors have expressed their satisfaction with it. I'm not going to repeat the headline savings. They remain at the moment in this report at 20.7 million. And we would mean that when we are aware of any additional government funding, we will have choices about whether we need to do any drawdown from reserves and to what extent. Now, in the light of the higher levels of government unrestricted grants announced today, the Cabinet will reassess the position when fuller details are known and will make adjustments to these proposals. We will also keep a very close watch on COVID-related spending to ensure it can be contained within the resources provided by government. And that would apply in the event of any second spikes within our area. As members will know, as part of the recovery plan of preparation, a full review of the capital programme was undertaken and adjustments made to reduce in-year borrowing costs as well as reprogramming slippage caused by the COVID lockdown. We were concerned about the continuing impact the pandemic would have on the ability of council tax and business ratepayers to pay their bills, as this ultimately feeds into future years' budgets through the performance of the collection funds. So in this regard, we welcome the announcement by the government today of greater flexibility in the treatment of collection fund deficits. The full detail of our proposals for the plan are contained within the appendices of the report, together with a full equalities impact assessment. I do not propose to speak to these details, but I'm happy to take comments on them. Now, Leader, this will not be the last report on this year's finances for sure. As we know, the pandemic is a fast-moving situation, and there will be, and there may be, unexpected twists and turns ahead. And it is really impossible to predict these future events because so much depends on sensible behaviour by the public and adherence to government and local public health guidance. We intend to monitor the delivery of this plan very closely, but also changing conditions locally that may impact on the council's finances will be followed by corrective action if that is required. I have no intention, as some members, opposition members have suggested, of allowing the council's finance is to drift such that intervention is necessary by the Director of Finance. And it remains my intention that despite the exceptional circumstances we face, the books will balance at year end. Now, Madam Chair, I commend this report to the Cabinet for approval. I move the recommendations set out in paras 21 to 26, but I also move an additional recommendation 2.7 as follows. And I'll read out the full wording. And it is that the Cabinet welcomes the announcement of additional government funding to the Council, in particular the proposed income compensation scheme, and agrees that once the detail has been received and analysed, a further report will be brought forward, setting out any adjustments that are necessary to the financial recovery plan. So, Chair, with that, I move.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. I'd first of all like to say thank you to you and also to all the Cabinet members and as well to officers for all their work in getting this plan to this point in such a short space of time. I think it's very interesting that today the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, is announcing additional support for councils, and I thank him and his fellow ministers for listening to our concerns, for taking action and making this commitment. And I'd also like to thank our local MPs for the help they have given in pressing our case. And especially to Andy Rothery and Will Godfrey for ensuring that civil servants at the Treasury and also at MHCLG understood the detail behind our unique circumstances. We appreciate the package we think we are being given, but as with anything, as with everything, the devil will be in the detail, and we will need to analyse carefully this new announcement and then consider the impact it will have on the financial recovery plan that we are putting before Cabinet today. Hopefully, it will take some of the pressures off, but we are not out of the woods yet. We still need certainty, and this plan gives a framework which is flexible enough to ensure delivery of services to our residents while we have the necessary time to assess what government will give us. It is clear from the actions we have taken that this administration can and will step up to challenge while still demonstrating our commitment to key promises we have made. Look at the plan and see that there are no cuts in areas delivering sustainability measures. See instead that we are looking at how the council can work differently, work together and across service areas to make a difference, for example, in addressing the climate and nature emergencies. Note too that there were no plans for redundancies and that we did everything we could to protect frontline services. This was a plan for tough times, and until we know the full details of the measures being announced, this plan is still the financial recovery plan. So we will continue to proceed with accepting and voting for this plan. And so I second the proposal. I now open the floor for speakers. So I have first Councillor Crossley.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I too like to give my thanks to the ones that Richard and you have done, but in particular, I'll refer to the areas in my portfolio responsibilities. I won't be referring to any of our leisure facilities because at the Cabinet meeting of the 22nd, we've got two significant papers coming forward on both Entry Hill Golf Course and the GLL services that provide so many leisure services across Bath and North East Somerset. So I'm not going to refer to those. I'd like to really concentrate on two issues. One is parks and one is museums. So the message on parks is not really about budget saving, but it is just an appeal to everyone: take your litter home. We've had a tidal wave of litter, and it's not just in Bath and North East Somerset. The news programmes in the evening show that this is a problem, a COVID fever, if you like, that has afflicted the whole country in massive proportions. We've removed something like 4 tons of litter from our parks. So that costs us money. That's money that could be providing other services. And so I would urge people to enjoy our parks, but to leave them looking as they would like them to be when they arrive. Take your litter home. Please take your litter home. The biggest contribution to this financial plan from my area, however, is in museums. And I think we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Stephen Bird and his entire staff in the way they have responded to the challenges posed by COVID. And as part of that, I have to announce publicly that the Victoria Art Gallery and the Fashion Museum will not be reopening until Easter next year. And this is to enable us to make substantial savings, but also to enable us to reallocate staff to provide a safe visitor attraction to the Roman baths. These two facilities, though, will still be available for private hire when people will then be making their own health and safety use of those facilities. On the Roman baths, what impact does that have to us? Well, until COVID, out of the 6 million people that would visit Bath and North East Somerset a year, approximately 1.2 million would come to the Roman baths. And the Roman baths is a point of great historical significance and one of the aspects that make Bath a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it's part of our identity. And it generates, of course, a lot of revenue. So we are reopening the Roman baths, and yesterday myself and the leader of the council had a tour of the facilities that were going on. And for us as a council, our mantra is the health and safety of our staff, of our visitors is paramount. And so we are reopening the Roman baths. We will be keeping with a 2-metre separation. And the reason for keeping with a 2 metre separation is because a lot of people would be going round as a group or as a family of 3, 4 and 5. And so that makes the need for the 2 metres, I think, a little bit more needed. We've adjusted the package that people will have in the Roman baths so that there is a one-way entry around the whole of the visitor attraction. You will go in through one door, you will be safely conducted around. At all points, there will be members of staff to help and guide and advise, because, as I say, we absolutely want our visitors to have a pleasant and safe experience. And at the end, you'll be given a choice of 2 exits. You can either exit directly or exit through the shop. Again, our shop has been relayed, as have many shops in Bath and other retail centres across North East Somerset, so that visitors can have a one-way trip round the shop and a safe cash payment or card payment before leaving. So we put a lot of work into reopening. We expect to move up to about 1/3 of our visitors that we had last year. So that is quite clearly a big reduction in income, but it is also a saving because of the countermeasures that we've been doing in our other 2 museums. So we welcome people back to the Roman Baths from Monday, and I hope people will come. I'd just like to remind everyone that if you're a resident of Bath and North East Somerset, you should, or you could, or you're able to have a discovery card, which means you get in free. If you haven't yet got your discovery card and you'd like to visit the Roman Baths when it's not so crowded, please just bring 2 forms of identification that you live in Bath and North East Somerset and pay bills, and we'd love to see you as one of our early visitors at the Roman Baths. And I look forward to Monday morning to visit the first family in, to welcome the first family in at 10 o'clock. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crosley, and thank you. That was a magnificent advert for the Roman Baths, and I'd just like to echo your thanks as well to Stephen Bird and his team, particularly Penny, who have worked so hard to make sure that this attraction can open in as safe a way as possible. I just want to add one little extra bit of detail. If you do have a discovery card, can you make sure that if you do want to go to the Roman Baths, that you also book a time slot so that you can then go and visit the Roman Baths. I would now like to ask Councillor Warren if she would like to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So like everyone else, I'd like to begin by thanking the council officers who worked so hard to resolve the financial difficulties that have arisen directly out of the pandemic. Turning to the climate emergency, it was one of the highest priorities of our administration when we were elected last year. And despite the turmoil brought to our community by COVID-19, must remain so. The climate and nature emergency has unfortunately not gone away, although the Prime Minister has forgotten this. This week, he threatened to build, whilst reducing council's ability to independently set challenging energy efficiency standards and threatening ecological protections in direct opposition to the principles published last month by the UK's Committee on Climate Change. The government aims to lock us back into fossil fuel dependency and to diminish those ecosystems on which we depend. Mr. Johnson's new homes are a liability that will require energy efficient retrofit before the plaster is dry. I'm therefore delighted that in Bath and North East Somerset, as Councillor Romero said, despite our enormous financial challenge, we are keeping the additional funding allocated in February for work on the climate emergency, and it will be used to support and shape the green renewal we envisage for the district. We hope to work with local business to create new jobs by boosting our renewable energy capacity, by making our existing buildings more energy efficient, by constructing zero carbon new homes and schools, by planting trees and improving the biodiversity of our wild spaces, by converting our transport system for active travel, electric and hydrogen, by supporting our local farmers to farm in ways that are kinder to nature, and by shortening supply chains and sourcing goods locally. We will also encourage green technology and the circular economy here in Bath and North East Somerset and reduce the carbon emissions associated with tourism. This is our vision. COVID-19 has brought sadness, loneliness and stress to many in our community. People have passed away, whilst others have been left with lasting infirmity. Others again have been unable to access food, and record numbers have turned to food banks. A generation have lost 6 months of their schooling, and existing inequalities have been widened. However, despite the darkness, there have been glimmers. The situation has brought communities together in caring for the vulnerable, inspired people to start growing their own food, motivated some to share rather than shop. We have all now experienced a world with clean air and fewer vehicle movements, a world where we can connect with nature and hear the birds sing. And many of us have got to know the green spaces on our doorsteps better than ever before. We must now hang on to these small positives, building them into our vision of the future as we build back better. I commend this paper, which prioritises the climate and nature emergency for funding as we begin our green renewal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warren. I'd like to invite Councillor Ball, please, to speak.
As they say, follow that one. Very difficult to follow. Excellent speech on Councillor Warren. Can I just pick up a few points? And I'd like to thank all our members of staff who are working from home at the moment in unusual circumstances and still delivering services for our people, particularly with homeless communities as well. People have no homes. They've all been found accommodation during this crisis. And I pay tribute to all those officers who've worked in that particular area. This COVID crisis means the world will never be the same again. Will we have holidays in the future? We don't know. Will the travel return? We don't know. It's been outlined by many cabinet members already. This world is going to be completely different, and the response in the funding that we're going forward with in this financial recovery will help us move forward in the future and enable to sustain our services. Some of these services that are high on people's attention is obviously litter, and Councillor Crosley adequately addressed that particular issue of making sure we don't drop litter and take it home with us. Grass cutting is also in Councillor Crosley's area, and whilst people shut in their homes, they do see anything that's not cut properly and in a tidy condition is evident in their eyes. So if we've got any extra money this year, it does come back in. I would like to see the grass cutting return to normal if possible. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Next to speak is Councillor Appleyard.
Thank you, Leader. I wasn't actually intending to speak per se about the recovery plan, but as you would expect, my portfolio is very much about people, and I've mentioned earlier on in this meeting that my gratitude to the amazing work that our officers have done, and it is an amazing piece of work. They've not only supported our communities, but they've also supported other people within our communities in terms of like our care home arena, and making sure that they have all the necessary support to enable them to look after our most vulnerable people. But they can't do that alone, and we've had some fantastic support from Virgin Care. They've done a huge amount of hidden work where they've still got to look after the people that are vulnerable, those people that need care. And Virgin Care have responded to that, and they've still gone out and they found innovative ways of actually contacting these people and making sure that their care needs are looked after. The community themselves have come together in a phenomenal way. 3SG, the third sector group, have got together, and prior to COVID, there was conversations going on about how the third sector group and the council and Virgin Care could get together and maybe create a platform of support for our community. And I suppose, like in all things in the council world, these things take a long time to come to fruition. And but within literally weeks, we had everything set up. Everybody forgot all about the boundaries that existed within their organisations, and they focused on the goal, which was actually to get together a platform of support for our residents. and they've managed over 6,000 phone calls. They've delivered huge amounts of food parcels and collected medicines for people and everything like this. And they've actually underpinned a lot of the work that the communities have actually been doing. But there is one group of people that I really want to highlight, and it can get forgotten in all this, and that is actually all the people in our community that have been shielding. Now, we've got many thousands of people who, through their medical conditions and for a whole raft of reasons, have not been able to keep an engagement with our community. And we are now moving into a point where they need to have the confidence to actually re-engage with our community, to go to the local shops and feel that they're not going to be left exposed. Now, that needs the support of everybody else to enable that to happen. And I know my colleague Joanna Wright has been working extremely hard to look at getting the appropriate distancing measures in place around our local shops. A lot of people look upon them as an inconvenience. You know, they say they look horrible. Those bollards are terrible to look at. They are horrid. They don't make anything look nice, but that's not the reason why they're there. They are there to help and protect our most vulnerable people when they re-engaged. So I'd just like to sort of pay particular thanks to those people, and hopefully everybody will give them the support they need to enable them to re-engage and enjoy the community as we know it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard, and you know, particularly for those very good points, particularly about how shielded people need, you know, still need the whole community's help to ensure that they too can get their lives back to a form of normal, and also for reminding us all of the fantastic partnership between Virgin, the 3SG and Council that made the Compassionate Communities Hub, that has provided so much support over the last few months to our most vulnerable people. Councillor Wright to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Romero, and thank you, Rob Appleyard, for your kind words. The need to bring in an in-year financial recovery plan is really, really unusual. COVID-19 has raised major financial issues for this council, and over the last few months, I don't think people realise quite outside of this group of people and the other officers how hard so many people have been really working to re-examine what we have, what we can do, and the situation that we're really in. And as has already been said by Councillor Samuel, we don't know what the future looks like, and we also don't know what COVID-19 looks like in the future, and that has been a real challenge to so many of us in the last few months. We have all wanted to do the best for our community, and how to make those decisions and take those steps forward is at sometimes a different decision each day. I would really like to thank the level of detail that this financial recovery plan has gone into. In fact, I would like to countenance that it's on the level of an excellent PhD. And I say that because I have a husband who teaches at that level and understands the detail that isn't required. And I'm very concerned that people don't realise just the amount of work that this budget has looked at and thought about to protect all of us. How we manage this now new budget for 2020 and protect our political priorities in the coming year is important to every one of us. The decisions we are going to have to take are still going to be difficult. And in the last few months, it's been quite obvious that government itself too has been challenged, as we all know, by the pandemic. We have received, in particular in highways and transport, various statements by the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps, ideas of what he wants us to do and how to take those pieces of work forward. Sometimes they have been confusing, sometimes they have been hopeful, and many times they have talked about large amounts of money, which people then think we have to spend. We have still yet to receive phase 1 or phase 2 of that funding. So I am concerned about the overall impact that people's expectation have upon this council to deliver a huge amount of infrastructure that will support lots of people to move to sustainable transport, which was something we really do as a group have political priority in our minds. What we have had to do is make sure that our pavements are wide enough and that parking is removed so that people can move about as easily as possible and to stay well. And that has been our main concern, the health of our population, because without a healthy population, there is nobody spending any money. And we need to get back to pre-COVID days when we can carry on our lives as we used to. But there is going to have to be a new normal, and the new normal is going to look different. So I would ask that many people consider this when they do go out and about in their daily lives. The speed that cars move at is going to have to change, because there are many more people who are vulnerable, who don't have vehicles, that are now having to walk and cycle because they can now no longer get on public transport. And the next few months are going to be significantly challenging for all of us. We know that the universities will be returning and the schools will be returning. And what that looks like and the shape and form that takes is going to be difficult. So I would ask that many people think about the future and what they can do to work as a community to make sure that those ideas are considered by all of us, and how we stay well and keep well is so important. I could go on at length, because I shan't, but I would like to particularly thank the team I work with, and to name them: Chris Major, Gary Peacock and Paul Garrett and Craig Jackson, particularly in the team, and Mandy Bishop, because I know how hard they have worked over the last few months, how many hours they have put in to make sure that the measures we have so far put in and the further measures that we are looking to put in will be put in place. I would also like to thank Volker Highways for all of their work that they have undertaken in very difficult circumstances over the last few months. And particularly, I would like to thank Richard Samuel and his team for putting together this in-year budget and financial recovery plan. And I hope we can move forward from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I think pretty much everything you said, I don't think anybody would disagree with. I'm not seeing any more speakers who have indicated they wanted to speak. So I'm just, apart from Councillor Guy, who has literally just indicated. So I'll ask Councillor Guy to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what my colleagues and friends have said about Councillor Samuel and his team, and thank him and all of his officers and all the officers in the council for all their hard work. It's been extremely trying times, and they've done an exceptional job. As people will know, it's a priority of this administration to protect and enhance preventative services for children in Baines. Well, we have had to make some very tough decisions in the current COVID-19 situation. We're working hard with initiatives and positive solutions with many of our partners. The council aims to improve people's lives, and that means in these challenging times working with partners to find new ways to support children and young people. We commission services from a range of charities and organisations to support vulnerable children and young people, and the financial pressure is such that we have had to propose within the recovery plan that we reduce expenditure on some of these areas where we felt it was safe to do so without impacting on statutory functions. However, I am delighted to inform you that resources and support have been put in place and can be offset by services of up to £57,000 by an agreement reached with St John's Trust. This will benefit our most vulnerable children in our society. This support will be formalised with the relevant providers and will form part of a wider work which St John's are implementing in Bath and North East Somerset as part of their recently launched a foundation fund to help enhance children's lives. This cooperation means that there will be zero frontline reduction in preventative services that provide support for the most vulnerable in our society. We all agree that children are our future, and we will do everything in our power to protect their lives and our future as well. And therefore, I fully support Councillor Samuel's report.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. And can I thank St John's as well for their offer of help at this time, and thank you and also your officers for the work that they've done in getting this agreement. So I don't see any other speakers. I'm just going to quickly flick across in case anyone's indicating in another way that I can't see. I don't see any other speakers, in which case then I'd like to ask Councillor Samuel if you'd like to sum up, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've just got a few brief points in summing up. The plan as approved today will be implemented, but obviously we will be mindful of any changes that may come our way shortly. But by approving it today, we are signing this off. I'll give a commitment, as soon as the detail of additional funding is released, we will analyse it and we will come forward with a further report and if necessary, any revised proposals for approval in the normal way. Work will be commencing soon on a revised medium-term financial strategy, and advanced planning will begin for the 21-2 budget. And I'm sure that's the last thing anybody wants to hear, as we seem to have been doing finance for the last 12 months, but it is actually that time, and we were planning to do that at this point. And as part of that forward planning, we will be examining future income sources in detail and modelling these in varying scenarios to our best of our ability. And that picks up a point made by the corporate PDS panel in Councillor Myers' address. My last comment to Cabinet is I would like recorded for the minutes, is a vote of thanks to Andy Rothery and his team. Without that, and without the excellent work they have done, we would not be where we are today. And I do know from the contact I've had with Andy, he has worked night and day and weekends on this work, and the fact it's so good reflects that effort he's put in. So I would like that recorded for the minutes if we can. So Leader, with that, the recommendations have been moved and seconded, and I suggest we go to the vote.
I absolutely agree with what you've said. Okay, so we now move to the vote. What I will do is I will ask all those in favour to raise their hands, and then and obviously if anybody disagrees, you know, and so on and so on. So all those in favour.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
That's good. Right, well, thank you, everybody. I'd also like to now say thank you to everybody who has watched this meeting on YouTube, and to everybody that has participated in this meeting, and to everybody as well who has helped set up this meeting, because, you know, Zoom meetings and other virtual, you know, forms of discussion aren't always quite as simple as perhaps you know others might think. So I'd like to thank those, the sort of unsung heroes of our democracy as well. I'd now like to just remind everybody that the next Cabinet meeting will be held on the 2nd, no, it won't, it'll be held at 2 p.m. on the 22nd of July, 2020. So, you know, towards the end of this month. And on that note, I would now like to close the meeting.